On this episode of KTVGR MultiViews, we will take a look at a game inspired by, let alone created by the same people who were behind Guardian Heroes. We will also take a look at a 90s fighting game based on a late 80s and early 90s TV show. We will also take a look at a very underrated gem of the 16-bit era, and this will be our first foray into reviewing a mobile game. Stay tuned.
kidThunder VG Reviews, where we bring you some of the best of retro gaming journalism.
Released in October of 2012, developed by a.k.a. Entertainment in collaboration with Japanese animation studio Bones, and published by Atlas, here we have is Code of Princess for the Nintendo 3DS. Before this game was even released, there was high anticipation for it due to it being sort of similar to games such as Guardian Heroes. By the way, come to think about it, the artist and director of this game were also responsible for Guardian Heroes, so comparing both games would be an absolute understatement. According to the story, you start as Princess Solange Blancheford Deluxe, who at the very beginning got exiled from her home kingdom, Deluxia, after it was attacked by monsters and her family gets blamed for the Dystron army attacks. She is tagged with numerous allies and friends such as Ally, Lady Zozo, Allegro, and a few others, with each of them telling their respective life stories. Solange and Company would later find out Queen Destiny is a cover identity for a fallen angel, Distill, who unsuccessfully attempted to destroy the world. This game is a hack and slash beat 'em up that has a plethora of game modes and playable characters. Throughout the story, you are able to play exclusively as Solange, Ally, Zozo, and Allegro, while in free play mode, you can choose any available character. This game also happens to have RPG elements, especially at the point where you can level up your character's attributes. Obviously, this aspect was taken from Guardian Heroes, in which the comparison is quite apparent. You can also play this game in multiplayer mode, whether through local or online. Now, coming from personal experience, I actually bought this game on day one release, and I was able to find players online on the same night while playing the game. However, if I were to go on right now, it'd take a prayer and a miracle to find anyone who is interested in playing. There are two endings to this game, and it all depends on if you destroy the stone or not to bring out the outcome. That choice right there is totally up to you. Audio-visually, I really love the cel-shaded art style and the anime cutscenes. The voice dialogue throughout may not be the best, but it sure does a really good job portraying all of the characters. The soundtrack is also outstanding. And come to think of it, if you bought this game on day one release like I did, you'll get a CD soundtrack bundle with it, so take a listen. Overall, Code of Princess is a game that I suggest you to own. With numerous options and features this game have, it's hard to go wrong with this awesome title, especially since this game had the original artist and director of Guardian Heroes as part of the responsibility of this game. A direct sequel for the PS4 and Xbox One was planned, but as of this current day, the developer a.k.a. Entertainment has disbanded. But anyway, this game gets a huge thumbs up. Released sometime in late 1993 and early 1994, our next game up is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters by Konami for the Super NES and the Sega Genesis. I'm very aware that I'm leaving out the NES version, but keep in mind, if I don't have the game, I cannot review it. And by the time I was preparing this episode, I've seen price ranges of the NES version of TMNT Tournament Fighters around $100 for just a standalone loose copy. No way I am paying that much for it, and I'm not going to bother emulating it either. But I will start off with the Super Nintendo version first. In the Super NES version, the plot starts out with a tournament being formed and many fighters have entered, including the old Shredhead, who is portrayed here as Cyber Shredder. However, come to think of it, Shredder has nothing to do with what is taking place here. Instead, there is a newcomer, Karai, who is out there to attempt to ruin everything and lure the Turtles into a trap by kidnapping April O'Neil and Master Splinter. Asuka, the ninja girl, is an exclusive character in the game, let alone in the franchise, and was probably inspired by Mitsu from that trash pile of a film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. In terms of gameplay, the SNES version is reliant on 4 attack buttons, 2 weak and 2 strong, and it's really down to button mashing and duking it out as your favorite Turtles characters. In the tournament mode, while fending off, you have a mutagen ability which will build up over time. If it flashes, you can perform a devastating attack on enemy characters by hitting both of the strong attack buttons simultaneously. Unfortunately, if you're playing the story mode, you cannot use your mutagen ability, and you can only choose between the 4 turtles. Audio-visually, the graphics are outstanding and very detailed. It even rivals the graphics in Street Fighter 2, and just by looking at them, it has aged wonderfully throughout the years. The soundtrack is also some of the best tunes I have heard in a Super NES title. Each song represents the moves in the game perfectly. It's hard to point out anything negative in this version. In the Genesis version, the plot starts out with Master Splinter meditating, but gets kidnapped by evil versions of the Turtles, which he assumed those were his sons. Now it's up to the Turtles, along with Casey Jones, Ray Fillet, April, and an original character named Sisyphus, to travel throughout Dimension X and rescue Splinter from Krang and Karai. One interesting point, and the question I need to ask is, where is Shredder? Why is he not here anywhere, especially since he's in the other 2 versions? Understandably, he has nothing to do with what's going on in this version, but in the Super Nintendo version, he had nothing to do with all the mess that was going in there either. Instead, we have Triceraton. I'll tell you more about him later. Now on with the gameplay. I really don't get it how the developers called themselves relying on 2 attack buttons, punching and kicking. If I cannot recall, 1, we had Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat on the Genesis, and to top it off, Sega released a 6-button gamepad for the Genesis, which its main purpose was primarily for fighters, since the standard 3-button controller wouldn't work well. 2, why in the fuck would they bother putting a taunt button in this game? What do taunts accomplish in fighting games? It does accomplish something if you're fighting against somebody in real life, but this is a video game. In other words, the developers could have done 3 weak and 3 strong attacks, but they went to just a standard 3-button fighting system. Now, pulling certain moves off in this game is just a nightmare, and the enemy AI is literally the worst part about it, which makes the game itself become broken on numerous levels. Speaking of broken, I did mention about Triceraton. If you're fighting against him, he will literally wipe your ass all over the floor. When he bites you with his beak, be prepared to either pull your hair out of anger or throw your controller to the TV in disgust. It's broken enough, but I've played other broken fighters before. I'm looking at you, Wendy X Wyndham for the Nintendo DS. It also happens the same way when you fight with Krang. Sometimes your attacks go right through him and your ass is literally wiped on the floor no matter what. Overall, this game is really shoving you in the face with projectile abuse, which is unacceptable. If you beat this game, or at least get past Triceraton and Krang, consider yourself lucky. Don't get me started with the tournament mode, where it's an endurance match where you have to fight through 88 matches. And I'll tell you this much verbatim, it is not worth checking out. The audio visuals are a very mixed bag. In the character select screen, all the characters look pretty ugly. Throughout the game itself, the scenery looks a tad too much like Clay Fighter rather than the world of TMNT. And even the characters themselves look way too similar to Clay Fighter. The soundtrack is just so-so, but there are tunes here and there that I actually enjoy. But otherwise, there's really nothing to write home about. The verdict between the two. The Super Nintendo version is overall the better game. The Genesis version, while not being the worst, I've seen and played much better. Konami did an excellent job with both Turtles in Time and Hyperstone Heist, so obviously there's no absolute excuse they went downhill with tournament fighters.
Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtle Power!
Released in August of 1990 on the Sega Genesis, our next game up is Shadow Blasters. Over in Japan, it was given the title Shiten Myo, developed by Sigma Enterprises and Cyclone System. According to the plot, Ashura, who is an evil god, summons numerous demons throughout the planet, and it's up to our heroes Horatio, Tiffany, Marco, and Leo to counter him with the help from Hyperion. This game is a side-scrolling platform game. You can control only one player at a time. Power-ups such as speed, health, and skills are picked up along the way. You can also switch between characters on the fly without having to worry about a character losing a life. But even then, once one of the characters are dead, there's no way to revive them until the game is over and you decide to continue. The first 6 levels in the game are non-linear, and you can choose either one to start with, quite like Mega Man, while the remaining 2 levels are linear and you eventually reach to Ashura for the final battle. The controls in this game are basic, so it's all on you if you screw up. As far as the difficulty goes, it's really a breeze to beat, no matter if you set it to normal or hard. The graphics are decent for an early Genesis game, even though it will look like a slightly beefed up version of an 8-bit game. The in-game soundtrack is also good for the time as well, and the moods fit perfectly here, especially in the future level, and the ending theme sounds excellent. Overall, Shadow Blasters for the Sega Genesis is definitely one of a kind. While not being the greatest, I still find it a decent addition to your video game collection. I give this game a thumbs up. Real quick, this is the first time I will discuss a mobile game on the show. Here's Unity.Run, which was released on the Apple App Store and Google Play not so long ago. Courtesy to my good friend Vice the Determined for the video footage of this episode. This game falls in the same veins as Temple Run, but stars a girl who is codenamed Unity-chan. Her original name is Odoriko Haku, who also happens to be the mascot for the Unity game engine over in Japan. You can collect coins for points and food for extra pieces for life. That will wrap up this multi-review episode of KTVGR MultiViews. I'm Chuck Johnson, a.k.a. kidThunder, signing out. Take care, stay tuned for more, and keep playing your video games. Peace out.